filmmaking covers a variety of genres, and during the 1990s, one in particular saw a resurgence: the big budget disaster flick.
It's coming! It's headed right for us! It's already here!
For two science-obsessed kids growing up on opposite sides of Pennsylvania, nothing left a bigger impression than Twister.
The suck zone. I think we're going in!
Join Kelly and Joe as they dissect the second highest grossing film of 1996,
Debris! Dusty, we have debris!
Debris!
minute by minute,
Another cow.
Actually, I think that was the same one.
and relive one of their favorite movies of all time.
No, that was a good-sized twister. What was that, an F3?
Solid F2.
Tornado warning continues now.
All right, well, welcome back to Solid F2 Podcast, a minute-by-minute breakdown of the movie Twister. Kelly and I are back to talk about the fifth minute of the movie, minute 425, and we're finally going to get to the good stuff, right? Death and destruction is all good. Are you having problems back there?
Your microphone's all jankety here.
Yes.
This won't
Let's
stay
just-
up. It's right in my face.
Generally, a microphone usually has to be around that part of your body.
I'm literally leaning back, so I'm not touching it.
Quality, entertainment. Are you ready?
I guess.
Okay. Good start. So, death, destruction, and some really killer 1996 CGI is what we have in this minute. But we do time travel from 1969 to, quote, present day, but that would not be 2020, that would be 1996. So,
Let's
a
do
lot
it.
has changed in 24 years.
A lot has changed in 24 years.
All right, let's watch the fifth minute of Twister right now. All right, so there you have it. That is the fifth minute of the movie. And like I said, it continues what we talked about a lot over the last 2 minutes, which is the destruction of the cellar. And we get to see the unfortunate death of Joe's father.
Not the destruction of the cellar, just the door.
Well, that is true. You're right.
Just the door, which is one of the problems I have with this scene. That apparently the force was so strong that it could rip the door off the hinges, but not strong enough that it affects Joe or her mother in any way.
Or like the skylights that we talked about last
Right.
episode, the glass, all that is still fine. I mean, we talked about how shoddy the door was designed.
But if there's a strong enough upward force to pull the door away,
you would think something else.
would have been something more than just breezy for them in there. Their hair was moving a bit, but also I'm pretty sure she's screaming, "Joe, stay with me," and her mouth is not moving.
Oh, so we have more of that, huh?
It happens a few times in this movie. I'll point the rest of them out to you. Don't worry.
I'm sure that you will.
And despite me picking this apart, this still remains one of my favorite movies of all time.
Yeah, I mean, it's real. I mean, a lot of this stuff is nitpicking and whatnot, but it's from an emotion, a feeling of love and respect, and
I
just
love you.
kind of the
I want you to
inconsistencies.
be better.
The things that we would change. Honestly, and this could definitely be an episode down the road, and I've heard other podcasts do it with a variety of other movies. One do it with Twister, but I think we could come up with a not necessarily a reboot idea, but if someone was doing the movie Twister, what would our cast be? Would we change any of the plot, or would it be still attempting to get more new, better data for tracking and predicting tornadoes? Which I honestly, I think this movie would be a great candidate to do a reboot. You know, we're approaching 2.5 decades since it came out. So much has changed in both science, film, and digital technology that I think they could really do a strong job. And I mean, let's face it, half of Hollywood is remakes, reboots of classic movies or fun movies from the last 20, 30, 40 years. So why not do Twister?
Why not?
Why not contact Jan de Bont and see if he wants?
Maybe he's working on Speed
7.
4.
Four.
What speed are we on?
I'm not exactly sure. I think we would be on 4, but he only did 2.
Well, then he should do 3 again.
Right.
So yes,
So
there's.
what else in this minute 5 stands out to you besides the demise of the father?
Skip forward just like a second at a time if you can.
I'm not sure it'll let me.
Okay, keep going. Just like his hat doesn't even blow off his head. He gets sucked up into a tornado with a door. Nothing on the shelf is moving. The flame isn't flickering. He kind of sounds like he has to go to the bathroom the entire time he's holding the door.
He really
can't
does.
hold it. It's sad. Obviously, this is the pivotal moment in her youth where she decided, it's a tragedy, and what comes out of it is she goes to school to fix this issue that people don't have warnings and that parents are being literally ripped away from their children.
And she kind of not monologues, but speaks on that later in the film about 2/3 of the way through as we head into the climactic final.
Miss this house and come after you.
Christ, is that what you think it did? So here you get a nice little after the as they say in the movie, the F5 tornado, which I think you talked about last time, that the Fujita scale didn't exist until the early 70s, I think it was, 72, 73. And this takes place in 69.
Correct.
But you can see the destruction here. Now, this is all, I assume, posed, but I think they did a pretty good job of...
I mean, the trees are stripped. It looks pretty good. I'm not sure that branch is strong enough to hold a tractor.
A tractor, yeah.
But...
that's the one that stood out to me. I'm like, oh, there's just a tractor in that tree.
Right.
So, but I mean, it looks like they did a pretty good job.
No trace of all those chickens.
I know we have seen, but, for anyone listening, if you've seen aerial photos of a tornado, you know that it's just, it's what you'd expect. It's just stuff everywhere. But it is usually very concentrated. You can just go a little bit on the outside of the path, and most of the time things are okay. And you can see them in the path of destruction. But they did a pretty good job of recreating that here. And let's see if anything else jumps out. I guess one of my favorite parts of this final minute, I'm glad we got to it here, is they have that sunrise, and it changes to an image of the GOES 8 weather satellite, which you mentioned, I think, off air the last time, that obviously this is a real, true satellite.
Yep, even named that.
Right.
Launched in 1994.
But it's not exactly great digital photography, digital recreation.
I'm sure they did their best that they
and
could have done at the time.
The problem I always have with wanting to defend not just Twister, but other movies from the mid to late 90s is when you talk about the film and stuff, you're like, well, yeah, it was made 25 years ago. But then you also think that Jurassic Park was also made earlier than this.
Right,
And
1993.
And their CGI effects are miles ahead of everything else that's done in a lot of these other
All
films.
about the budget.
Now, obviously, a lot of the Jurassic Park stuff is also practical, but the things that they were able to overlay or use digitally compared to what else we saw in the decade, it's not even comparable. And you're right. I mean, that was a Steven Spielberg project that had a lot of backing. It was a, kind of a
You
big
just
deal.
burp in the middle of our podcast?
I did not.
Didn't you, though?
I did not. Maybe you heard my knee crack.
I'm watching you.
You can watch me all you want. I'm not really sure how you could watch a burp happen, but okay.
I feel like what bothers me visually about this is the lighting of the satellite. So the Earth is behind you. Presumably the sun is sort of directly to the right of this image. As you can see, there's the sunrise line sort of creeping there. But
Right, it would be, I'm not sure.
the wrong part of the satellite is lit.
Right. The back side of it should be lit at this moment. It should be dark to us.
But, I mean, it is a real weather satellite. It was launched in 1994.
So it would be present in 1996.
It would be
It would
present.
have still been a pretty big deal 2 years after being launched. And, when we discuss minute 6 here after this, obviously we're going to go to a laboratory, a scientific group that is using information from the GOES 8 weather satellite. They go to the National Severe Storm Laboratory is where we head to next, right? NSSL. So, it was a good try. I appreciate the attempt. I wish the digital effects were better because these stick out to me, this part, worse than the digital twisters we see later. It's just something about just how smooth everything is, like especially the Earth.
Yeah.
It's just very, very off, especially when we see now super high-res photos of the Earth in space, and this moment takes me out versus everything else. It's just this, like 15 seconds that we see. It's just super dated.
I also scientifically have a problem with this image that we're seeing here. The Earth rotates. I'm pointing to you this way. So that dark line there is the difference between night and day. So Florida and the eastern coast has just woken up. The Midwest and California are sleeping.
Yep.
It's dark. We don't typically see
severe storms
in the
early morning.
It's not that it can't happen. It's just that the way that they form, warm, moist air meeting warm, dry air, is typically not a setup that you see first thing in the morning.
No,
you typically have more stable air at the surface first thing in the morning. You don't have the convective activity that you need for severe weather. So it's not that it can't happen. It's just atypical. So
they're very, very rare.
Image bothers me
at least
a bit.
around here. I'm sure it's probably more prevalent in the Midwest, but yeah, you're absolutely right. It doesn't.
How often do you hear of towns tornado sirens going off at 9 a.m. while people are getting ready for work? You hear about them as they're watching the evening news.
Right, because generally they're mid to late afternoon into early evening, late evening.
And certainly overnight, but not usually. The coolest part of the day is right before sunrise.
I would think, and this is just me guessing, that the peak would probably be between, 4 and 9?
It depends on
maybe 3 and 8. I would think it's somewhere in there. There's probably a nice 6-hour peak where that's when you have the available potential energy and things going on that you need to be happening. But again, it's just like there's not too many places on Earth that cannot create a tornado if the situation presents itself. and there's not a certain time of day that there couldn't be a tornado. That's not how it works. The trends and
Certainly, there's
climatology and statistical
outliers.
analysis tell you this is when it's more likely or where it's more likely, but they
It's
can
just
mostly happen anywhere, anytime.
if you're gonna make a movie about a tornado outbreak, I would have at least gone for the science that happens most of the time, and not the weird outlier morning storm.
And we know, and I believe we touched on this, that they had meteorology consultants. We see some of them in the movie making cameos. Yeah. But I doubt in like post-production when they're just inserting things to make the story move along that they were just like, yeah, throw the satellite in there and an image of the Earth, it would look really good. And they weren't thinking, well, is this how the Earth would look at the time when the tornadoes would most likely be occurring? But
I don't see any murder hornets.
no murder hornets. No,
No basking bees.
actually, I think if you look closely, they're actually hanging on the weather satellite because they are able to survive in the vacuum of space. I'm not sure you knew that.
I did not know,
Yeah,
but it makes sense.
right.
Anything called a murder hornet, I'd believe.
Right. So let's not go too far along here. We don't want to spoil minute number 6. So death, destruction, and bad digital imagery. Is there anything else from minute 5 that you want to focus on before we end the episode?
No, that covers it.
Yeah, again, not a whole lot to dissect here, but we are finally in the present as the movie is set in, I guess, probably late spring 1996. This movie came out on May 10th, 1996, and that would probably be about right for when the movie is set. So we will get to finally see some of our main characters, the grown-up versions of them, in the next few minutes. Starting with minute 6, I think we're going to be introduced to Bill Paxton's character Bill, and his new fiance
Billy.
Melissa. So, all right.
Billy.
So, well, that's it for minute 5. Nothing else to say. No witty and nothing witty to add or fun facts this time.
No, I'm all out of wit.
You're out of wit. Okay. Excellent. All right. Well, then we'll be back in a little bit for minute 6. Thanks for listening to the Solid F2 podcast, a minute-by-minute breakdown of the movie Twister. That's all for this week. Please follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Solid F2 Pod. Solid F2 Podcast is part of the JMNJR Radio Network. Visit jmnjrradio.com for more.